Oh, yep. Big jack. Saw him. Oh, got it! Oh, yep. Oh, got it. That's a jack. Yep. Oh, good fish. Just taking off this rock wall. Perfect spot. We're in it here. Oh, got it. That's a jack. God, you can tell when they just belt it hard like that. Come here, you little beauty. Oh, I'll grab it on this G-splash. You beauty. Welcome back to another mylurebox video. In this video we're talking Mangrove Jacks surface fishing. So I'm going to take you through three of my favourite topwater lures this morning, how to use them, because the time's now, the water's starting to heat up and the jacks are starting to get onto the chew. So while you've still got a little bit of time before it hits peak season, get out on the water, try a couple of surface lures, get your casting accuracy going so you're primed up, raring to go by the time it really gets into gear. I've got my three surface lures here. I'm going to take you through how I like to work each of them. The first one I'm running this morning is an MMD 95 splash prawn. So I'm going to take you through that, but also a whole heap of tactics of things that you can consider broadly regardless of the lures that you're using, the surface gear, what you want to consider when you're out here chasing jacks to swing the catch rates in your favour and hopefully get you a little bit more action on the water. So let's get into it. I'm just going to keep the camera rolling this morning and I'll try and show you exactly what I'm doing. I'll spin you around so you can see where I'm fishing and talk you through exactly what I'm doing. This would have to be my favourite way of doing the surface fishing stuff. I mean, you can do it in canals around pontoons and bridges and things, but getting in against all this cover is definitely the most exciting way for me to do it. So you can see that I'm fishing the shadowed section of this creek, and where it gets skinny is probably my favourite way to do it. There's just less water, and a lot of the time up the back of these systems, a lot more cover and fallen trees and laydowns and things to target. And really what you want to be doing is focusing on your casting accuracy. That's number one for me when I'm jack fishing, is getting my casting accuracy right. So even now the water's at about 21, 22 degrees, and for me, if I get the chance to get my eye in and a bit of casting practice in when it's at that point, by the time she hits 24 degrees on the coast, then I'm usually right in the mood and right into my technique, and I've got it casting beautifully in against that cover or the bank. So if you're over half a metre away from your target, you're pretty much wasting your time. You need to be smack bang in against that cover, right up against that tree, scaring the paint off the lure basically. That's the idea. And you're going to get, casting, you're going to overcast things and throw it over trees and catch logs and things. That's all part of the experience, part of the frustration of finding your way to your mangrove jack. But I can tell you, it's all worth it. All of the hookups and hang-ups, it's all worth it for the time that jack just crashes through the surface. It's like nothing else. So That's really what you want to be doing. You'll get it caught up, and my suggestion there is, on the way out, if you're caught up on sticks, try and pendulum swing it slowly and just lift it around it without having to rip through if you can help it. Often if you're ripping through, you're going to get snagged unless it's really light stuff like what I've got here is pretty light stuff. That's why you need a decent leader. So I can get through that all right. That's where you want it, right in against the trees. And then once it's there, if it lands down right at that base, you just want to sit it there. You just want to give it as much time in against that structure as you can. And then with these little prawns, the way that you want to work them is super subtle, especially early season. Sometimes the jacks are a little bit tentative to come out. You know, in the middle of summer or late in the season, they'll come out and crush things straight away the moment they land. But often with these little prawns, the beautiful collar on these gives it a tiny little subtle action, and you can even slow roll them. So I'll fire it in there and just let it sit for a little bit, and then it's just little half turns of the reel. And that's all it needs to be with this splash prawn as a start. Especially if it's really quiet conditions like this, like super calm and early morning, the jacks are tweaked onto everything. So a little half turn of your rod and you're sort of watching, you're just popping that line off the surface, that's all it needs. And that just looks exactly like a little shrimp in against the bank. You can even slow roll them. So that's all I'll do is just chuck it out. Give it a chance to sit there. The jacks will hone in on it as the ripples filter out and hit the cover, hit the structure around where your lure's landed. That'll turn the jacks on. And then I just do little half turns just to put a pulse out. And then if you want, you can just wind that thing back in slowly for a little bit. Then once I'm about 1 metre or 1.5 metres away from the cover, that's it, I'll just rip it in. The majority of your jacks are going to come from that first metre, and so for me, I'm not going to waste any more time. You'll still get jacks hit you all the way out, but the time in that first metre that you can give your lure, that's by far the most effective. So you're better off, instead of spending an extra 20 seconds or whatever fishing, you know, after 1 metre, spend that extra 10-20 seconds in against the cover. Just leave it there, give it a couple of tweaks and just leave it there. That's where it's going to get hit. And you can leave it there whatever you want, 10-20 seconds. The jacks are tuned in and they're making a decision. I think the beauty of just keeping the camera rolling for a single take with one of these videos is you get a feel for the frustrations that happen with jack fishing, like caught some crazy vine, I'm using a super heavy rod. This is like an 8 to 10 kilo and it's 5'6", so it's really short, great for casting accuracy and super heavy. So I'll bash it about a bit and rough it up. It's not ideal because you can break eyelets, but I know what it can take because I've bashed it up for years. And this is all part of the nuttiness of jack fishing. Like no issue at all. Throw over those logs. Who cares? If you get bit and you lose your lure, great. You know, but if you're going to come out and hedge your cast and throw around the outside of cover like this, around the edges, you might get trevally if you're lucky, but you're not going to get any jack. You've got to come in with this no guts, no glory style of approach, where you're willing to lose your lure and you're going to throw it in probably to the most likely spot where that's going to happen, and then just once you hook up, just try and get it out and do what you can. The way that I'll pick apart one of these big heavy logs generally is your first cast wants to be the best. So you know, if you're fishing with a mate, you want to be patient on your approach in. You don't want to try and get that first cast from 35 metres away just to be first at it and miss your target, you know, and stir everything up. I'll tend to wait until I'm in a good position to get a really good cast, and often it's that one, which is right at the base of the tree where it's the heaviest, the thickest part, where it touches the surface of the water, and there's some water underneath it for a big jack to sit. And that's where a lot of the time the big fish will sit, at the base of that. And from there I'll just try and bring it on the shoulder of the log as it comes out, giving it plenty of time to stall. Or if there's a split in the main trunk as it's lying like that, I'll get it right up in the gusset there, and I'll just try and slowly tweak it out. That's where the jacks tend to sit, on these laydowns and the heavy cover. You know, barra will sit off on the bushy part out on the edges a little bit sometimes, like down, suspended, whatever. The jacks are right in hard against this cover. Even though they like that darker area, you know, so you might be thinking deeper water, they love it up underneath the log. That's super dark, like sitting like, boom, sitting right there underneath the log. Even if there's only, you know, that much depth of water underneath it, they'll sit in the darkest part, right in the shadows. So you've got to get your lure in there and be ready. Alright. Yeah, so hopefully you're picking up, like, you just leave it there, let the ripples go really slow. You can just slow roll these. They're great on a slow roll and a pause. Lots of pauses, that's the idea. You can get a little bit ticky with it, with your rod tip. And the beauty of these splash prawns is that they've probably got 3 styles of retrieves, I reckon, which is that really slow roll, or that tiny little just poppy sort of action, really subtle, where you're just getting it's got a floaty back end. If you're just getting that back end to pump a little bit like that, just like a little shrimp, as it's sort of like kicking away, that's fantastic. Probably my favourite retrieve. And then you've also got, just like, you can use it like a popper, and it will throw a big bubble out, nice big deep noise like this. I'll see if I can show you some of the sound it'll throw out. So that's it, you can get a bit of sound out of it. You can get that front cup popping, you know. And the hooks on these are great. Even the small ones, the hooks are really good for jack. Nice and strong. You might be able to see my shadow here. Like, it's out in front of me now. If the bank turns around, I'm heading down along there. I'm trying to cast in front of my shadow, because my shadow in against the bank is going to just spook bait, spook the jacks, and they all know about it. So those little subtle things, I think, really do make a difference. The tide at this point is really slow. There's a tiny bit of water movement, and often that's what you'll get up the back of these systems, is not a heap of run. To compensate for that, I just try to get my casting accuracy right on top of the nose of the jack. You know, if you're fishing the main section of a river, you want a bit of run, and I think that sort of turns the jacks on for a feeding mode. But what you do have up here is a lot of cover that you can fish, and you know, if there's a lot of bait up in these back sections, that's what I'm getting excited about. If I see bait early morning in here scooting around, you hear a couple of bust ups, like cracks, real cracky jack takes, that's what you'll look for. And if you got logs with splash marks on them as you're coming in the morning, then you know it's game on, and you've got to tighten your drag right up. Mine's super tight, like basically as tight as I can get it. If you've got logs like this, like lay down logs, and then they finish, so usually I can see some logs that are out off the bank that the log finishes, you want to just bring it to the edge and just sit it there. So often, as soon as you get to the end of a log and just sit it at the end there for a little bit, that's when the jack comes out from underneath and cracks it. Basically up to that shadow line where I'm fishing. So as soon as it gets out of the shadows, that's the end of it, and I'll just rip it back in and fire it back in again. Alright, so that's the 95 splash prawn by MMD. Hopefully you can see, look at that, what a beautiful lure. Really well balanced, great finish on it, and that real innovative sort of cup style collar that it's got at the front. It's not really a cup, it's more of a collar. It still pops, but it's just got a really unique action, and I think that's a big part of its appeal for this lure. And a great profile. One of the other things I haven't spoken to you about is, you know, varying your retrieve depending on the cover that's underneath the lure. So if I'm fishing a really deep section, I'm trying to keep it in against the bank if I'm fishing with a surface lure. But if I'm running over a rock bar, for example, then my retrieve, that metre and a half, I'm forgetting about that, and I'm just fishing over that rock bar all the way back, because the jacks will be hidden in the little caves and crevices around the rocks, and they'll be anywhere, and they'll be listening to it as it comes closer and honing in on it. So, you know, it's not a case of it's always beside the bank. If you've got a rock bar, which is a great spot, or a pressure point, throw past the pressure point 3 or 4 metres and then bring it around the edge as the water sort of filters around and pushes into that pressured area. So, you know, there's sections where all bets are off, all of that technical stuff will go out the door and you'll fish it differently. You know, if it's really clear water, then the jacks can come from a much bigger distance. So you might extend your retrieve so they've got time to come in on it as they sort of hear it and then see it, pick up on it, and then come a little bit closer. Generally, what you've got up the back of these systems is, you know, a little bit dirty water, especially if it's mangrove lined and it's real muddy banks. It's going to be super dirty when there's water, tidal movement and things. So that distance they're going to come from is probably a little bit more minimised, which is, you know, maybe one of the reasons why you want deep balls in a lure like that G-splash. If it's super dirty, so there's a knocking sound, things like that, they all sort of come into it a little bit. But certainly fishing over rock bars, you want to get in close and then work it a little bit further back and give them more time to come out from all those rocks that you're fishing over the top of. And, you know, on the other side of the coin, if you're fishing against retaining walls around the outsides of canals and things like that, the entrances, then you have to be in really close. And it's that first metre where the batter of the rocks drop off, you've got the retaining wall. Keep it against the retaining wall as close as you can. Keep it next to the pontoon or right beside bridge pylons. Generally, I'm sort of fishing fairly fast. You know, I might just put in maybe 1 or maybe 2 casts into a spot, unless it's that key spot where you're like, okay, this is the best structure in the creek. Then I might spend 4 or 5 minutes there and just hammer every area, every little sort of join in the tree or every little spot I can get my lure into. I'll spend a little bit longer if it's that top spot of the whole creek. You know, you're trying to hit absolutely everything. Sometimes the jacks are, oh, there's a hit, there's one there. Oh, buddy. Sometimes the jacks are like dispersed along a certain bank and they'll be sitting behind any little insignificant twig. They don't need a big heavy structure depending on the creek. Sometimes they're on a bank where the bait's sitting or getting pushed up onto, and they're just sitting behind the lone stick that's like not even that thick. They're just on anything they can find. So it's certainly worth, you know, searching for fish. And that's why I like my fizzer. I sort of fizz, and I just search for fish with the fizzer. This prawn's a bit similar. You can fish that a little bit quicker. The G-splash probably a bit slower. What else? You know, a walking lure, like a walk the dog style. What do they got? Like those cultivars are pretty good. That sort of sit like a potty mullet. Those big, you know, big rapalas even, like those V-skidders even. That's a big walking lure. They're good for searching for fish. change up now and I'll show you a couple of things with these other ones. I'll show you what else I've got here. So, where is it? The other two that I've got, even if I might just talk you through these and we'll wrap things up. There's going to be a lot more of this stuff coming with some jack action where I'm hooking up. If you haven't seen some of my videos, like if this is the first video you're watching from me on Mangrove Jack, I've got a ton of stuff on jack fishing, surface lures, skip casting, deep divers. There's a heap of stuff on my channel, so probably just type in Mangrove Jack fishing mylurebox and you'll find that stuff. I've released 2 fishing DVDs on jack fishing specifically, and the Gold Coast Kayakers Guide is another one that I've released. It's got some great jack fishing action in there. It's got some surface fishing stuff in there, and it's also got a lot of skip casting. So there's heaps of stuff with action and hookups that you can see, but there's more coming as well this season. The next couple of weeks I'm going to get stuck into this style of fishing. This is one of my all-time favourites. You know, the reviews I've done on this, there's action in there, but this is the G-Splash by Lucky Craft, and Mick Horn's probably the bloke that's made this famous, I reckon, and on the back of his success with it I started using it. And a mate of mine, Brock, has used this really successfully for Mangrove Jack all up and down the east coast where the jacks live. And the appeal for this is that really deep cup, beautiful finish on it, and there's a big, you know, broader profile than a lot of poppers at that size. So I think this is like the 80, pretty sure that's the 80. They come in I think at 65 as well. But the bubbly sort of rest that this has got, whereas when you're popping that through, and you can get really aggressive with this thing and it won't move very far, so it stays in against the cover and then it sort of just bounces while it's resting, that turns the jacks on. So if you don't have one of these in your box, but you've got something that when you pop it, it sort of just bubbles while it's resting on the water, because it's super floaty, that's what you want. And I put a BKK treble on the front of these, or a 2 times strong owner hook on the front of them just to juice them up a bit, and they're fantastic. So that's the G-Splash, and then this is one of my favourites as well, and I've done plenty of videos on this thing now. This is the Cotton Cordell Boy Howdy. It's probably the lure that I've used the most in recent years to catch a lot of jacks. It's got 2 props on the end of it. That's what you're looking for in the shops there at Anglers Warehouse. They've started bringing them in, I think. One of the only crew that have got them these days. But that thing there, if you don't know how to use that, you need to get on and watch the Jack Guide, a downloadable DVD that I've done. There's about 20 jacks I got in one morning on this thing. It's absolutely fire. And the gold one's my favourite. Alright, so if you've got any questions, just hit me up in the comments of this video, and I'll put a link to a couple of the other videos where there's some jack action, where I'm actually hooking up and you can see exactly what happens once the hookup happens and how to fight the fish. But hopefully those couple of tips are getting you fired up, getting you started, getting you jacked for a season of topwater stuff. It's a lot of fun, and if you've got the right kind of lures, it's going to put you in good stead to get a lot more interest. You just want to slow your retrieve down and give it plenty of time in hard against that cover, and if you're not getting snagged up and caught up in the bushes and things like that, you're probably not getting in close enough enough of a time as you need. So get really aggressive with your retrieves and with your presentation. Just see if you can lose a few lures. It's all part of the jack game, I think. Alright, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.